Thank you all for being here at the 34th and second online independent music business session. The session is called the Band Session. We're going to talk about band stuff, etc. We haven't announced our next session yet, but we will in the coming weeks. But we'll see you again at some point soon-ish. I'm going to hand over to Jamie from Mike to say a few words. Now unmuted.
Just me speaking. Read my lips. Hi, so I'm the new executive director of the Ottawa Music Industry Coalition. So most of you are probably familiar with us, but if you're not, we're a nonprofit here to work with music industry professionals and all levels of government to build up a strong music industry in Ottawa. We had just announced a grant that just went out a few weeks ago, and so we're still taking applications. I see a few of the applicants in here today. We're right now in the midst of confirming some further programming, potentially with the city and even larger. So once we know that, we're going to pair that up with the grant, but fingers crossed that it goes through. So, but anyways, if you want to stay up to date on any Mike news, you have our Facebook channels, which is where we've been sharing this event, and we have our newsletter, and you can always send me an email and I could pop it into the chat. But I'm very, thank you for organizing this, another really interesting IMB session. And thank you to our speakers, Matt, Scottie, and to our moderators, Britt and Maryn. And so on that note, I'm going to pass it on to our two moderators, Britt and Maryn.
Well, hi everyone. Thank you all for being here. So we'll just do a little bit of an intro on both of us. So as Jamie said, I'm Maryn. I am the front person for local band Five+None. We've been a band for about 4 years now, I'd say. I'll keep it there, keep it short and sweet. You can read our big bios on the Facebook page.
I'm Britt, and I am sharing a screen because I am her mother, and as well as I've been helping with the band management for a couple of years now, which is how come I get to be here. My professional background is in theater and entrepreneurship, which has some tie-ins a little bit. And then we are going to introduce Scottie and Matt. Matt, I see you right next to me on the Brady Bunch squares. So why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself?
Sure. My name is Matt Sobb. I play drums in a band called MonkeyJunk. We're a band that is probably most usually associated with the blues genre, despite having a real wide range of influences and I would say a more contemporary sound than many traditional blues bands do. We've been a band together for over 12 years now. We're a three-piece, so the other guys in the band are Steve Mariner and Tony D, both well-known in their own right, as well as with our band. So yeah, again, you can find all the dirty details if you go to our various social media pages and website, but that's me in a very small nutshell.
Cool. Scottie, do you want to take it over?
Sure. My name's Scottie Irving. I play keyboards in the PepTides. The PepTides is a 9-member group in Ottawa. We've been active since 2011. So Dee Dee Butters, Claude Marquis, Dale Waterman, Alexander Pachuki, Rebecca Noel, Alex Wickham, Andrew Burns, Juan Miguel, and myself. So, and the 9 of us are involved in between 30 and 40 other Ottawa acts as well. So it's quite a large scene. And I've also managed the band for 2 to 3 or 4, I think it was 4 years ultimately, before passing the reins on. So I inherited those reins, I had those reins, and then I passed them on. And I spent some time in Toronto at Canada's Music Incubator studying management there. So I learned a few tips and tricks of the trade. Great.
I forgot part of my intro was supposed to be telling you guys how to ask questions. So yeah, you should see the Zoom group chat here. So please feel free to just pop a question in there. You can send it to my name directly if you want, or you can put it out there for everyone, and we'll just integrate it into the evening. Yep.
So I think we're just gonna sort of start at some basics. So first off, Matt and Scottie, whichever one would like to speak first. First off, about your management roles in the band. How did you come into them? Was it a choice to have an in-member manager versus outside? And sort of tell everyone what a manager's function to you is.
Okay. Should I go ahead, Scottie?
Go for it.
Okay. Well, for our band, we started really in a very, here come the cliches, organic and grassroots kind of way. The band, you know, the three of us have all been in the music business for a really long time. We've done a lot before forming this band on our own and with other projects. And this started out as being just kind of a fun weekly get together that ended up kind of developing into something a little more, very kind of slowly and steadily. So at the beginning, we didn't even really set out to form a serious band. It was kind of I guess you could call it a side project that became, over the course of probably 4 to 5 months, a more going concern, and then eventually a full-time thing. So because we grew so slowly and steadily from very humble beginnings, we never, there was never this like really big plan. So it didn't really involve, okay, we're going to form this band and we're going to conquer the world. And so we need a manager and a booking agent and a this and a record deal and all that, right? It grew so slowly and steadily that as more kind of started happening, we just slowly did things ourselves. And because of the experience we had, all three of us, in the music business, we've already, established relationships with some booking agents and concert series promoters and festival directors. And so it was very easy for any one of us to either receive or send messages to these types of people. We didn't need someone to really do it on our behalf earlier on. And so that's kind of how it went. Now, as the band progressed, the need for a manager, we kind of, along the way, we asked ourselves kind of every so often, do we need someone else to help us with all this stuff? And we kind of, searched out opportunities here and there, but it always just kind of came back to us doing the work. Now, as far as the point you raised, Maryn, about, is it like, what exactly is a band manager? How would you define that person? And I've always, in the kind of more traditional sense, seen a band manager as someone that is kind of, I'm a big like sports and hockey guy as well as music. So I always see a manager and a coach as a similar kind of role, like a team's coach, And so that person usually kind of is like an organizer and an overseer and someone that kind of, in musical terms, takes care of business side of things so that the musicians can take care of the music side of things. But of course, in this, independent, looking through an independent music lens, it's not always, you don't always have the resources for that, right? So, so some of these roles have to be done by the people in the band until you can maybe potentially reach a point where you're able to bring in someone else to do it. I was gonna say something else. Oh, about the, you know, band manager versus an outside manager. Sometimes, depending on kind of workloads, it can be too much for someone in the band to handle. It depends on, are the members of the band full-time musicians? Do they have day jobs or part-time jobs as well? And sometimes it's just it's a matter of hours in a day, right? There's another kind of, I would say, aspect of all of this is when it comes to a band that's progressed to a certain point and wanting to progress further and take it to the next level. Many would argue there's a need for someone that is well connected within the industry, and that type of person acting in a management role can achieve some of those goals of getting out of your hometown and all that kind of thing. So sometimes, and it's funny, sometimes as a younger band or a developing band is getting out there, and there's a need just to have a different voice to represent the band. I have a friend within the industry who I will leave nameless, who has actually, to satisfy that particular need, has a fake management persona and a separate email with this person's name. And when sometimes people don't want to deal with a musician, they want to deal with a manager, this person uses that email address to deal with some of that stuff. Anyway, forgive me if I'm rambling. I can.
We might have the same friend. I've heard that as well.
I've never heard of that.
Maybe it's happened, and that's kind of maybe more on the booking side of things. But I think the ultimate role of a manager in a perfect world is, like I said, like a coach. So a manager isn't necessarily a booking agent. Ultimately, a manager will find the right booking agent for the act. A manager will negotiate with a record company to get the best deal in that avenue. But sometimes the reality is a manager has to wear many hats, and they're not only the manager, but they're also the booking agent and the accountant and the drummer.
and the counselor.
Sure, yeah.
Unlicensed counselor in my case, and so I would echo that by saying that a lot of the time in our group, I got into the habit of, Matt's right, like there are different roles and different hats to be worn in this. So it's all the things he mentioned and more. And I got in the habit of just signing the email literally from the hat that I was wearing at the time. So I would say, this is Scottie, the keyboard player hat, saying I have this need that I need to be met by you guys. This is Scottie from the manager hat. I need this to be met from you guys. And that somewhat depersonalized my situation, because when you're in a management role and a performance role, fundamentally the job is to make magic happen on stage. And you sometimes can't achieve those amazing levels of magic if someone perceives you as an authority figure and happens to have a lot of issues with authority figures, which, it certainly isn't unheard of. So
this is the problem with having two moderators. I was just going to ask, Scottie, in your situation, it's a little bit different because you and Matt have very different sized ensembles that you're working with. So was it sort of more necessary for you in a larger group to sort of take control of things a little more early on?
Yes. I think that one theme of the whole group is that a lot of the typical progressions that one would make in the music industry, we did backwards. Like we started with an external manager and then we went to an internal manager. We started with an album and then we became a live project. That's been the case for sure. And just to answer your question a little bit more fully, one of the most important distinctions I found was internal management versus external management. So the external management is, between the band and the outside world, where you're I saw it when I was in that role, I saw it very much as a protector role, because artists are very sensitive and the industry is very insensitive. And so you have to sort of play that cushion role sometimes. Right. However, that takes a lot of internal strength that did wear me out eventually. So, so if you go the internal management route, you're just talking to your bandmates and you're making it work, making committees, making things happen, working on the chain of command. And then when you're talking about external management, for example, right now, I'm sort of the point person for the PepTides external manager who's in Toronto right now. So that's how we work.
So for both of you, just to inform our audience, are you both in management roles currently? Have you since had an external manager that you've hired? What are both of your current situations?
I'm a former manager, so I know the ropes, and I am the point person for the external manager. And yeah, and that's been the case for about 1.5 years.
Cool. And for me, we being, different, than the PepTides with 9 members, we're only 3 guys. So we have a very tight unit, and we are, all 3 of us kind of assume co-manager roles. We each have certain things that each of us do, I kind of take care of all the administration. I take care of all the kind of banking and money stuff, and kind of all the kind of practical stuff. And other guys kind of, Steve takes care of a lot of the bookings, and Tony does other stuff as well. So, it's, the one thing I should say about our band is it's always been a 3-way democracy, like an even split of everything. From the start, it was the agreement, like within the first week of just naming what we're doing, that was decided early, that early on, that we would be an equal partnership, 3 ways. And for, I would say, the majority of things we agree upon, primarily because we are kind of all on the same page and have similar goals and expectations and kind of set of values as far as our music. Don't get me wrong, it's not to say that we don't butt heads on things from time to time, and we certainly do, and we all bring something different. Another kind of cool dynamic about our band is that we all come from a different decade. We're, as far as our ages go, so we're all roughly 10 years apart from each other. Steve's 12 years younger than me, and Tony's 10 years older than me. So it's kind of a cool, kind of different dynamic where, I'm kind of the guy in the middle where I can relate to both of them. And
right.
But Steve and Tony are also very close and come from very similar musical backgrounds and have very similar influences. So like music itself, I should say, has always kind of been the easiest part for us. Once we just get to play music, we're, again, it's going to be cliches, but we're kind of like set free to do what we're meant to do. It's all the other stuff that has to be, a little more difficult. And
yeah.
So
Scottie, Matt's talking about like a 3-way democracy, and then with you being, when you were the manager of a 9-person band, how did that work in terms of decision making, and like, did it make you feel a bit more? Did it affect the dynamic of the band and that kind of stuff?
Yeah. I was really pleasantly flabbergasted, if I may use the phrase, to hear the word democracy, because we used that word a lot in the very beginning. A democracy of a different size, 9-way democracy, and we have, I would say, in reality, we've become less democratic over time, and that's because there's just so much work that needs to be done, particularly because we're a very visual band. And so not only do you have all these auditory concerns and songwriting concerns, but then you have, like, it sort of multiplies a lot. We have men and women, we have different generations, like Matt was saying as well. So there's just a whole lot of work to be done. And so what I determined was I am entitled to a vote in, say, the costuming committee, but I don't really want one because I can't be bothered to spend that much time thinking about it. And I trust my bandmates enough with those decisions that they'll tell me what to do. I will trust them and it's going to be great. But I do want more of a say in the financial committee, for example, or the songwriting committee, or who we're working with. So the beauty of the system is that people can trust other people, like I said, to do the things that they don't want to do but still need to be done, and still get that ownership over the tasks that they actually do enjoy most. Because I love networking, I love talking to people, and other people in the band just hate that. So ideally you'll get into a social dynamic where the net is cast properly, and that's a luck thing, and that's a learning thing.
Yeah. Well, and something I sort of wanted to go back to that sort of relates to that is something Matt said about all of you guys sort of having naturally the same opinions on things. And I was wondering, are there sort of certain deal breakers when it comes to members in the band and decision making? Are there certain things that are must-haves that you need to all agree on? Are there certain things can be flexible?
Mm-hmm.
Interested in your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I was just reading about this the other day, so it's on the tip of my tongue, so I'll just jump in. There's kind of 4 categories of decisions you can make in the music business or any business. Leaf, twig, branch, and trunk. So a tree. So leaf decisions are decisions like, shall I sell this CD in the store right beside me? And I just, things that you can make quick decisions on, and nobody's going to really disagree with you, and you can really just go ahead and report to nobody about. Mm-hmm. Twig decisions you should report to more people about. Branch decisions you should ask for input. And then trunk decisions is like you absolutely need sign off on everything. So those are the varying degrees of seriousness. And for us, a trunk decision would be entering into a professional relationship with an external manager or a booking agent. Those are things where we definitely need to convene a full meeting with all people saying yes. But then, should we work with this kind of camera or that kind of camera on the video? That's a branch decision. So not everyone needs to know.
Matt, do you have thoughts on that?
Again, with the difference in members, it's obviously, I'm imagining Scottie sending out an email to 9 people and wondering how fast that all 9 get back on something, So that certainly a difference there. It's much easier for me to send a quick text message off to both Tony and Steve and, hey guys, the NAC has announced this new Canada Performs thing. What do you think? I'm gonna send in the application. Are you guys cool with that? Now, it's
Matt, I think I have you beat on that. When we first started this band, the kids were kids, and so we had the 5 members plus all 10 parents, and one of the parents, I see Heather is here right now. That could be a gong show for sure.
I could just imagine, and as technology is what it is today, we're becoming accustomed to being able to access information so quickly. And I think sometimes, we feel like we should be able to get an answer quickly from somebody. And, this is a whole other IMB session about, technology and all that. But, people don't necessarily have to live right on top of their smartphones at all times of every day, But again, just for the 3 of us, it's as far as decision making goes, and it kind of relates back to the you know, kind of everybody kind of working, you know, paddling in the same direction, same kind of set of values and goals. For us, decision making generally is I don't know if easy is the right word, but you know, we debate and go back and forth on things, but generally with a smaller unit, it's easier, and we try and always have consensus, unanimous decisions.
Right.
Of course, Scottie, I really like that leaf, twig, branch, trunk concept. That's great. I'm keep that in mind.
Cool.
You know, there are some things is like, you know, guys, we need new tires for the van. I got a quote. It's going to be, you know, $990. Do you want me to get 2 other quotes, or do you want me to just go ahead and buy these tires? Like, exactly. Those things are fairly easy to do.
And that brings up for me, like you mentioned the word consensus. And there's like consent versus consensus, and they're similar words, but they actually do different things.
Sure.
So like if like you can be on a decision, you can be like a red light, a yellow light, or a green light. And so for me, consensus means like everyone has to be a green light, but consent means everyone can be a green light or a yellow light, you know, feeling okay about it, but not going to stand in the way, as long as no one's a red light, you know. And then so those are.
Is there a veto in your group then, Scottie? Is like with the 9 of you, if one of you is totally a no, then that's a no for everyone? Well,
I would say that with a trunk decision, by definition, that we have to be okay with that. Yeah. But of course, I find the best way to get decisions made, you know, because sometimes you actually do have an agenda. Say you really do want to work with this video person who's awesome, you know. I think you're more successful to whisper in the back halls a little bit and say, hey, I'm thinking about proposing this to the group. Will you support me, yes or no? And I'd be like, I think that's kind of a good idea, but have you thought about X, Y, and Z? And then you take that you take that information from your whispering phase, and then you actually incorporate it into what you're suggesting to the group, and you're going to have a more sellable, persuasive motion to put to the board, if you will.
Right.
And there's nothing wrong with whispering in the back halls. It's all in. We're all working on the same team. We're all paddling in the same.
Right. Yeah. Well, and something else that's related to decision making that can be contentious in some bands is a band agreement. So do both of you have band agreements to start off?
Yes.
No, and it's a great question, and I am. We have certain. We have a lot of verbal agreements, mm-hmm. but years ago we did talk about. You know, we have a few friends of the band that are lawyers, and one in particular who's also a musician who approached us and said, "Look, I'm not like trying to drum up business here necessarily, but do you guys have something in place?" And highly suggested that it would be a good idea. And we went almost to the end of getting it done and didn't. And I can't remember exactly why. Possibly at the time it was going to be a little cost prohibitive. Mm-hmm. And we decided, look, let's just agree on these terms. And however, I think a band agreement is a good idea. I think it's very important. I think in this day and age, it's probably, for any band that's really serious about their career and taking it to a higher level than just a local band, it should be essential. And even if it isn't, a legally binding, something you'd take to Byron and have him go over and make official. It's really important, I think, more so that the members of your band and your manager, if you have one outside of the band, be completely on the same page. And a couple of things I think that are really key to remember in being in a band, with your other members and a manager, or you know, depending on whatever the makeup of it all is that there's a trust there, you know. And that really applies to so many like basically every different aspect of a dynamic within a band. It applies to money. It applies to any other business
reputational
kind of
risk
deals.
Yeah.
It applies to songwriting, and it applies to, I know, you know, at some point we could probably talk about different kind of agreements that specifically apply to the music. So what is the deal with how you define songwriting credits, right? For us, we have an agreement as per our three-way equal democracy that the three of us, and we have a kind of a unique way of songwriting, and we write all the music first and then lyrics.
We do the exact same thing.
Oh, do you? Okay, well, cool. Nice to know we're not the only ones, but I know it's different for everybody, of course. But so essentially, when we do come up with a song, let's say we write a song, and it's all the music, right? And it's an even split. If one or more of us write all the lyrics, then that song is done and shipped off as a three-way split of songwriting credit. If we have a co-writer, like so what we've done in the past a lot is we write the song musically complete and send it off to a lyricist. We've done this many times with a great songwriter in Toronto by the name of Paul Reddick, very well known in the blues circles. He's a poet. He's the poet laureate of the blues scene in Canada, if I might. Anyway, so we've done that many times where we've come up with this song and we just can't get a good lyric on it.
Right.
And so we've sent it off to Paul. And then Paul comes back with all the lyrics, and we sometimes don't even have to change a thing, and which is awesome, and which has worked in some cases really well for us. At that point, it's a four-way even split of the songwriting credit. So someone can confirm for me if this is referred to as the Nashville way. Like okay, thank you, Scottie. So basically that concept is, if you're involved in any way, if you're in the room, if you've, you know, been involved, in order to avoid future conflict and argument about, you know, well, you know, you didn't really contribute that much.
If I hadn't been like on my Nintendo 64 and thinking about gold coins, and then like we thought of the idea of putting the gold coins in the song. So
exactly,
like if you're in the room, you contributed is the philosophy of the Nashville rules.
Yes, and
it gives you a place to start from. Yeah.
Right, and that's what we've always followed, and it's really, and I remember, like, I'm a real band guy, and I've done, like, I'm a freelancer as well, and I'm you know, I've done tons of playing as a hired gun, and that's cool too, and you know, with, you know, an artist and a hired band and on all that kind of, that's a much different dynamic. Maybe we should touch on that at some point, but I'm a band guy, and I'm all about, you know, I like the, you know, I'm making analogies to sports and stuff, but like for me, being in a band is like being in a gang, and we're going out to kick ass on town, you know,
for sure, and be loyal, and that has to do with loyalty,
absolutely,
as well, and that's where, like, it's a really hard thing to do, because in a lot of cases you have competing motivations.
Right.
For example, the informal nature of the friendship. For example, I just did a transaction recently on Facebook. I wanted some chairs, and we bartered for it. And I said I'd send an e-transfer, and I kind of held up my phone to show that I had goodwill, to just like say, here's your e-transfer, it's coming along. Mm-hmm. And I think that the person I was interacting with would almost have preferred a more trust assuming situation, and a less like, look what I'm doing here kind of situation, mm-hmm. because that can kill the magic too. So you're in the business of making magic, which requires these informal relationships, but then you've really got to have your ducks in a row when it comes to the songwriting credits, or the way the money is split, or the way services are divided up in the band. So just to finish on the management, the band agreement question, we actually kind of have two documents. I wanted to just put this out there right now, because any manager here or person in the management role needs to know that you're not going to get it right, and the fact that all the time you're not going to get it right all the time. But it's better that you're doing it than not doing it, I think, because you still have to start somewhere, right? And so I didn't get everything right when I was manager, but two things I did get right were the Constitution and the band agreement. Mm-hmm. And the Constitution actually sets out our structure, what we do. It defines all the committees and all the works and the tasks and the workflow, which we sometimes deviate from, but there's still something on paper, which is useful. And then the agreement itself, which sets precedent. And just one final note on the band agreement note is that our lawyer happens to be very, very professional and very detailed. But the process we went through for making our band agreement was more detailed than we could actually conceptually handle. And so we decided to make our own and have him approve it, as opposed to using the template. And so we made, I favor made-in PepTides solutions, as I call them, where possible, because they tend to have more natural uptake. And uptake is what you need. You need buy-in, you need uptake, you need commitment from people.
Yep. Well, and sort of going along with that, I know we're talking about songwriting splits, which you said would be in your band agreement as well. So I'm wondering a little bit, sort of relating to the agreement, but what other sort of contentious issues would you say either need to be in a band agreement or need to be sort of talked about right off the bat? Scottie, do you want to start and maybe just talk about that?
Sure. There are several. I'll just say one for now. Intellectual property, I guess, and maybe not even just the legal definition of intellectual property, but the spirit of intellectual property, people's ideas, their brands, their contribution to the artistry of the group. And in our group, for example, we have a founding member, Claude Marquis, who began, and really the PepTides was him only. Mm-hmm. And then other people were let into the sandbox at various times, and certain grandfather clauses apply to Claude, who happens to call himself Grandpapa. And then certain other grandfather clauses apply to me as a PepTides 2.0 member. But then we have two members who are PepTides 3.0 members, and they have less of a right to some of the legacy, such as it is of the older recordings, for example.
Mm-hmm. Matt, do you sort of have any issues that you think should be sorted right off the bat, either in an agreement or verbally or anything like that?
Well, I would say, and again, just to kind of reiterate my position on the band agreement, I think it's a good idea. I think it's important. I think it would and will and does prevent so much potential problems in the future. To have a document that you can go back to and say, look, it says it right here. You agreed, you signed here. It says it here. Sorry, it's got to be this way. We forget, and I get the fact that people change and people maybe grow and in different directions. I was referring to having guys in the band that are, or guys or gals in the band that are for the most part on the same page and have the same vision and the same set of values and all that kind of stuff. But over time that changes. And in our band, I feel like that's happened a little bit in that we've got different future aspirations. We all kind of see the band in different kind of, how can I say this accurately? We see it taking up a certain different amounts of time in each of our lives currently.
Yeah, big one. Yeah.
And that can be tricky. And so I think, I know this is kind of a general statement, but it's really important to try and cover all the bases, as many things as possible initially, so that when you get to the point that someone like ourselves are at, where, you know, one guy says, guys, I've got this other opportunity, I'm going to be gone for 6 months. So what happens, right? It's important. And again, I'll kind of get back to a couple of other kind of values that I started touching on, as far as trust goes, and trusting that everyone's kind of got each other's best interests at heart, fundamentally. But like a band is like any other relationship. You've got to have the trust. There's got to be honesty as a foundation, and key is communication. And that's been sometimes a challenge for us. And I don't mean to let all the skeletons out of the closet, but sometimes, you know, we care a lot about each other, right?
Good.
You know, it's important. We really care about each other a lot. And so sometimes if we have a personal either goal or feeling on something that we know might not be shared by another member, we might not communicate that, knowing that it might upset them or offend them, or, you know, so, but I wouldn't recommend that. You know, it's funny, at certain points I can think back, you know, kind of chronologically through the band's history, of certain points where we had these meetings, and in certain places where it was just like letting off a pressure valve, where we had to get a bunch of stuff out that we were all kind of holding in. And that, you know, if you do that more often, then it's not such a big deal but if you let it boil, or if you let it build, and then eventually it's just like, and it all comes out, right? So constant.
Sure. Yeah, if I could just jump in about the relationship part that you mentioned. In our group, we actually had, at its peak, you know, we have 9 members, but like 2 of them were an actual couple. Eventually they married, and 2 were another couple, and they actually eventually broke up. Although, because we had all this paperwork in place, it was a very smooth process, and it's still an intact band, and it's still an intact friendship. So that's really important. But what I did notice in the early phases, when we were trying to figure out how we worked as a group together, was that some of the people in relationships, subconsciously, consciously, I don't know, but they would support their romantic partner on business matters or artistic matters where they might actually not have done so otherwise. And so we have reached a level of maturity socially where we don't actually do that anymore, but that's what we sort of naturally did in the beginning. And even like Britt and Maryn, like, you're in a mother-daughter relationship, but you're also in a managee relationship. So I'm not saying that this is going to poison anything. I just think it's something to be aware of. And
it definitely is something to be aware of. Yeah.
Yeah.
I have a question about, you guys are talking a little bit about loyalty and trust, and about sort of priorities and stuff like that. So I mean, especially Scottie, with 9 members, how do you, and what Matt was saying about how different members might have different goals and visions for the band, like, how do you decide if someone wants to go off and do another project for a month, but we have this huge gig, huge opportunity? Like, is that in the band agreement that you?
Partly we work to address that a little bit. One of the comments I'll try and work in now before I forget, is that each industry and the organizations in the industry kind of have a culture that reflects the work they do. So I'll give you an example, like the Red Cross. I've done some work for the Red Cross, and they are an organization, because they're like an emergency organization. They're just like, it's in their culture to like drop everything and just like do things. And they're very accustomed to dropping things and running. And I find that people within their organization work that way. Matt was talking about bands. Like, I'm a lover of bands. This is a great experience. And bands are amazing because they have unique ways of proving that we can work together as people in a harmonious way. We have to stay on the beat. We have to not be out of tune. We have to stay in the rhythm. So I think the culture of the work that we do, or the nature of the work that we do, infuses the culture of the work that we do. So we do try and find harmony. One example in our band agreement is that we permit ourselves the right to do a show with 4 singers instead of 5. Which if we had to have 5 singers for every single show, then we would maybe lose about 33% of our gigs, you know? So we're upfront with our booking agent and our people about that too. We're allowed to be the PepTides as 8 or 9, but never 7. Yeah.
Okay. Huh.
That's if I could just speak quickly to that concept that Scottie mentioned. Like, as far as MonkeyJunk goes, it's only ever just the 3 of us.
Yeah.
MonkeyJunk is Matt, Steve, and Tony. That's it. That's all. We have had discussions about, and this was like one night late after the gig in Banff, I think. What happens if you, like, I was going skiing the next day. Well, what happens if you break your leg? We've got 4 more weeks on the road. How do we deal with that, right? And we for us, it was, by the end of the next beer, it was decided that we would, if that had to happen, that we would, that the band member would still receive 50% of the pay, and a replacement would get 50% of the share, my share, for example.
Right.
And that,
as a permanent member or as a temporary member?
Yeah, like so the permanent member would get half, and the temporary member that replaced that permanent member would get
for
half
the show
of the share of the 1/3 share.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting. Okay.
So, and that would have to be after expenses.
Yes.
And
Have you ever had to action that?
We did once for a corporate thing.
Okay.
And I'll be honest, I didn't like it. Like it's the 3 of us or none of us for me. And that's, you know, again, that just gets back to being in a band with guys that I love, that, you know, I know bands do it. I know members come and go. I know, you know, it sometimes goes to the extreme where you've got a band, like, I'm trying to think of an example. I think there was a few years ago at Blues Fest, the Yardbirds played, and it was like the rhythm section, but like the Yardbirds, for those that know, have had guitar players like Jimmy Page and Jeff Beck, and like none of those guys were there, but all these, you know, substitute members with the original drummer and bass player. And hey, I'm a drummer. It's important, right? But to not have the real heart and soul of the band there.
Yeah, you have to look at what's constitutive of the actual band, right?
Exactly.
Is it the song? Is it the hook? Is it the person playing it? Is it the capabilities of the technical capabilities of that person? Is it the way they put a drum beat together that's not like nobody else, or is it not? Maybe it's not, you know?
Right. And maybe so. and that's where things, you know, everything's kind of fluid, right? That sometimes there are bands that it's really the 2 guys at the front that write all the songs themselves, and the other members sometimes kind of come and go, and for this tour we've got this guy on drums, and then but it's still, you know, April Wine or whatever. It's
built that way. Yeah.
Yeah. So there's a lot of you know, kind of every situation is unique in that regard. But
in our case, I would have a hard time imagining substituting one of the singers. We have 5 singers and 4 instrumentalists. The singers only sing. The instrumentalists only play instruments. Mm-hmm. So I think it's worth noting that the only people we've ever replaced have been instrumentalists.
Oh, really?
And the singers, and the singers are people that audiences tend to have a very, in our case, because I don't think it's the same for MonkeyJunk, but in our case, the audiences tend to have a very close relationship with the people who are singing to them.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And that's sometimes they don't even know who we are, or, you know, now we get acknowledged, and we do the bow, and we do the 9-member bow, and it's awesome and stuff. But that's a double-edged sword, because we've actually had a bit of a stalking situation in the last couple of years, where a fan just will not leave certain members alone and is building social media accounts all over the place that just in order to be able to get in touch with the singers. And that's, as an instrumentalist, I'm a little bit protected from that effect. So I'm just putting that out there too.
Yeah. And Matt, do you find that the same thing, that your front person is more recognizable, or the audience comes to see them, or is it more of a unit thing?
I don't know. Like I mean, Steve loves to talk to people. So does Tony. I mean, we all do. We all do. I mean, if any of you know Steve and Tony, they're both very outgoing people, right? And very, very just warm and personable people who wouldn't want to talk with them, and they love to hang out. Sometimes, like, I take care of the merch. So if there's no one to sell merch and we're playing a club gig, I kind of go to the merch table, and that can be a double-edged sword. That can be like a bunch of people like, where's Steve? I really want to talk to Steve. Well, he's, I'm not sure. I think he's over by the bar, maybe. I don't know. Like,
autographs, hard to get.
It's so like I'm kind of split, because I like to be, who doesn't love to be loved, right? And appreciated and maybe pointed out. But I also don't mind sometimes being the guy behind the drums that's a little bit less.
You got a bit of a fence, like
a bit of a fence, exactly. And so, again, different dynamic with a very tight 3-person. Like the way we set up on stage too is we're kind of like in a triangle, right? So where everybody's visible, and I try not to be completely like all the way at the back. I usually kind of come a little bit forward, just because we're used to being close to each other, right? And on stage. So I think, it also goes back to the fact that we've all been kind of around and visible for so long. I think next year will be my 30th year as a professional musician. Tony's been at it for over 40, and probably zeroing in on 45 years as a professional musician. And Steve started so young. He's probably let me do the math. He's over 20. So over 20 years as a pro musician. So
it reminds me, one time I remember like combining all the ages of not the ages, but the time spent in the PepTides years of our group, and we're almost 100 now.
Oh wow, that's cool.
9 people, 9 years. That's 81 years. So
yeah,
go ahead.
I think we did that math as well on like how long we've each been playing professionally for, and it was at the time it was over 60, so it's probably over 70. But
it goes up fast. Yeah,
it does.
So just looking at the time right now, we don't have a lot of time left. So for audience, just a reminder, if you have any questions, that you can write them in the group chat right now. We can try to get to them before the session ends, but just sort of more big picture stuff, Matt and Scottie. When you when you're talking about band goals and band milestones, sort of overarching, where are you guys right now? How do you decide on those things?
Well, I think every band has to define success for the members, and that can change over time. Our philosophy has always been, I think, quality first. Like, we really talk about quality a lot. And career-wise, it's a very weird industry, but we're happy and proud that we're sort of a regional player, and we endeavor to be set up so that if we become a national player, we're not going to have these disasters that can make or break groups. And we are striving for that national, but we're maintaining the regional. So that's where we're at.
Cool. We're in an interesting time in MonkeyJunk. We've been together for 12 years. We've made 5 records. We're kind of in a bit of a holding pattern, although we just did a bunch of video recording yesterday. We're all involved in some different projects at the moment. And so MonkeyJunk has kind of become a bit of a secondary thing for all three of us in the last year or and a half-ish. So at the moment, we're kind of, I think we're all, it's just kind of there. And we're really, I think when we got together yesterday, it felt so good to play with those guys again. You know, it had been a month or so, and of course, with everything that's going on, it's even harder. But we were in a large space, we were distanced apart, we were safe about it, which is important. But it's interesting how time, when you're used to being together for so much, like for so much and for so long, like we had 10 really busy years where we toured a lot, and we needed to put a little bit more space in between things, just to, you know, maintain personal relationships and the set, you know, the health of our band. But I don't know, sometimes when you're not together as much, it makes, when you do get together, so much more special. And we're just kind of at a point where we'll always, I think we'll always have MonkeyJunk, but we're doing other things as well, and we're all cool with that. And that's important, right?
Yeah, there aren't any right or wrong answers for anybody, but if you're cool with it,
yes,
that is really important.
Yeah, it is. And so I'm, you know, we're working on a couple of things from afar, and I'm excited about where things might go in the next little while. Awesome. But again, with today's reality, who knows where that could lead, right?
Yeah. And I guess just to kind of piggyback off of that, and also attempt to answer the question that I can see in the chat about about that, you know, it's a very changeable and fickle, and because of that, exciting place to work in. And it's kind of like the Wild West, and sometimes it's very lawless, and sometimes there's slime, and sometimes there's kindness, and sometimes there's buried treasure, and all these different things. So I would say, like, and sometimes like, you know, 3 or 4 years ago, we would play a show, go back home, you know, take a shower, and then turn on Twitter, and then like look at all this like endless stream of tweets. But now Twitter is like irrelevant in music, and it's all Instagram. And so the marketing question, I would say, is very much keep abreast of the changing winds of social media. Social media is here to stay, but which social media it is and how it will happen is going to be different. And I guess you got to be prepared to commit to a strategy, but not for very many years, because you might need to take what you learn from that strategy and pivot it a few times. That's the start of an answer.
Yeah, that's good. Just to go with the management theme, you guys expect your managers to do the marketing and the promotion, whether locally or nationally? Is that a manager?
I've never had success in getting a manager to do that, but certainly they'll weigh in with opinions and give support. But I think that is the gift and the curse, because, you know, your personality is what people want to see on social media, but and nobody can make that up for you, but it's a lot of work. So we have a whole committee for it.
I think for, you know, in a perfect situation, a manager's role is to say, when you're talking about marketing and stuff like that, is to say, okay, guys, we need to market our band and our brand. That's an important part of all of this. So me as the manager, I will find a really good publicist. I will find someone that maybe specializes in social media. You know, it's like you're like, again, like my previous analogy, like the coach. But you're directing traffic to kind of include people in your team that are kind of experts in those fields. Now, again, if you're, you know, a more developing band that doesn't have the resources to be able to do that, then of course that might fall under the umbrella of the manager. But in a perfect world, a manager is someone that will be able to kind of delegate to those, you know, different aspects.
Great. Sort of just to wrap up, since you both have self-managed your bands, do you have any advice for anyone that's looking to self-manage?
Well, yeah, I mean, based on my experience anyway, I think it's important to, if you're gonna self-manage within your band, to kind of delegate, and not one person saying, like, come up with this together. Well, I'm pretty good at banking stuff, and so I'll take care of that. And like, kind of equally divide the tasks that are necessary for those that are willing and maybe proficient at those things. And at a certain point, seek out perhaps an outside manager when you've kind of come to the point where you're hitting a ceiling maybe. And I know we've done that, where we have kind of wanted to seek someone out to maybe take us in a different direction. It's kind of important, I think, at a certain point, in order to grow beyond where you may be at, to have someone maybe that is already plugged into various avenues of the business, you know, where they, you know, where they can take an artist on where they already have a relationship with a couple of different record companies, for example, a couple of different publicists, booking agencies, etc. So it's, you know, there's no straight answer to any of these questions. And again, forgive me if I ramble a bit, but I really think that it's such an important role, and it's such a different role for every situation. So good luck, everybody.
Scottie, can you address Christian's question in here, because you were the internal manager?
Yes, I was the internal manager, and the internal manager, like when we had the first external manager, she was entitled to an equal share among, so it was like 9 members, but a 10th member, and that's how we addressed that. In retrospect, I should have taken a double cut, one for the keyboard player hat and one for the manager hat. And I regret my decision because, and the reason I did it at the time was because I sold myself short and I didn't acknowledge the full value of the work I was doing, and that presented a lot of challenges. So I would, that comes to my ultimate answer, which is self-care and honesty. And because it's a very burnout heavy endeavor that it's one of the most intoxicating and one of the most, the highs are so high, but the lows can be pretty low. And so I would say that being fair to yourself in terms of getting sleep and exercise and those things, and also being fair to yourself financially, because you're going to approach that work with less resentment than if you're getting remunerated for it, even if the remuneration is only symbolic.
Yeah.
It's still, the symbolism still matters, I would say. So, so certainly a manager is, the industry has a rule of thumb of 20%, but you know, in our case, 20% would have been inappropriate with all the other people. So we made our own calculations, and yeah, but I, you know, live and learn. I'm not, Matt's the only one saying a sob story tonight, Matt Sobb. But I'm, you know, live and learn, do stuff and try stuff and mess stuff up, and don't mess it up too badly, and then learn from it and regroup. And the thing is, like, there's always another summer, and there's always another season, there's always another song. And, you know, if there's a gaffe that you make, like, celebrate the fact that you tried something, and just keep going.
Yeah, I just a quick echo to that. You know, we've as a band worked with a couple different booking agents outside of ourselves over the years. to varying degrees of success. And to be honest, you know, sometimes things don't work out and you have to make a change, and that's okay. You tried, and maybe hopefully learn something from each experience. And I just kind of want to echo the sentiment there, Scottie. You know, things are going to happen. You'll make mistakes, but this is music, right? This is a passionate art form. And if you can remember why you're doing it, then that'll get you through.
Well, great. I think that's sort of a nice way to wrap things up. If anyone has any final questions they want answered, just type them in the chat. But otherwise, I think we're going to turn it back over to Byron and Jamie.
Well, this is the part where Byron promised snacks, isn't it?
Yeah, but I get to eat them all.
Oh, okay.
Thank you all. I appreciate the raw honesty from Matt and Scottie about the experiences. And you know, we can all take something away from everything everybody's saying, and you know, customize it towards our own situation. A couple quick comments about the band agreement. And I'm gonna copy a link in the thread here, but I wrote a blog about band agreements years ago that just lists a bunch of questions that people can answer. I had one person come by the office once and just kind of answered all the questions, signed it, and that was their agreement, which I do not recommend. But you know, these are questions to think about. You don't need a lawyer to make an agreement official. If you have an agreement, you can change it later on if you all agree to those changes. But the general concept is that it's a lot easier to split up rights and money before there is any. And having an agreement in place reduces the likelihood of conflict. So I'll leave it at that about band agreements. I probably do band agreements like 3% of the time. Most bands do not have one, although most should. But yeah, you could do it on your own. You don't need a lawyer, but you know, you can if you want. Second thing I put in the thread was about the subscription to the IMB series mailing list. In case you're not on it, you can just click on the link there to get signed up. But yeah, I wanted to thank everybody for their time, both the participants and the speakers. Matt, Scottie, Britt, and Maryn, and Jamie, my partner in crime in the series. And we're going to be back again soon-ish. We'll announce a new session soon. And Jamie, do you have anything else to add about what OMIC is up to or how people can get involved? A bunch of people joined the session after your intro there, so maybe even if you just want to repeat it.
I do appreciate all the honesty, and I think what resonated was it's really about relationships, right? And then you put that emotional aspect to the artistry, and you throw in 9 people, the more complicated. So I think that frankness is so important, but like most issues, they always come up because of trust, miscommunication, expectations aren't clarified. So I think everything that you like mentioned was so key, but sometimes we get involved for the passion and forget those fundamental elements that you do have to address. Thank you too for both stepping up to be managers, because sometimes that's not a role necessarily people want to play in those types of situations. So someone kind of has to fill in that gap. And so the fact that you guys stepped up to do that, I think is really neat. And the fact that you shared so much important information. If you guys had more resources that you want to share, like anything that you found helpful, feel free to send Byron or me an email, and we could share that through our channels, through our email distribution list. I'm always trying to curate resources that are helpful for musicians, and we could share that on our social media. So if you ever have any other thoughts like that, feel free to let us know and we could pass that on to the group. But thank you all for taking part. And thank you, Byron, for organizing yet another wonderful, informative session.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you all for being involved in
Stay safe.
in whatever
Thanks, everybody.
shape or form.